My fellow Americans, it is hard to report this news, but I must. March 29th, 329, never forget this day, when violent extremists attacked the Kentucky Capitol. In an insurrection, storming into the building, police desperately trying to get them out as they attempted to disrupt a legislative session. These violent extremists, many of them were arrested, were demanding the right to give children sex change surgery. Okay, let's slow down a little bit. You get the point I'm trying to make. A large group of far-left extremists stormed the Capitol during a legislative session, which I'm told is insurrection, because they want to give children sex change surgery. That's it. Welcome to the modern America. Well, of course, in Kentucky, they've banned this, and the governor tried to veto it because the governor wants to give children sex change surgery as well. Let me read you the news and explain to you what's going on. The first story is hundreds of protesters descend on the Kentucky State Capitol on Wednesday as Republican lawmakers enacted a sweeping ban on sex changes for minors after overriding the veto of the Democratic governor. Under Senate Bill 150, doctors are prohibited from providing hormone therapy or other gender-affirming treatments to anyone under the age of 18. Can I just pause real quick? Post-millennial, why, it's funny because I'll always say something about the post-millennial and then because I know Libby and she comes on the show all the time. She'll be like, we changed that. You were right. Gender-affirming treatments, why even write that in the story? Under Senate Bill 150, doctors are prohibited from providing hormone therapy or sex change surgery to anyone under the age of 18. Don't call it gender affirming. Don't use that language. Well, we've got this story of the protests and the people getting arrested, and I have a video for you. But I do want to read for you the breakdown of the bill from the Lexington Herald-Leader. Of course, they call it gender affirming. But before we do, we have a sponsor for today's video, and that is Virtual Shield. Go to surfinginternetsafe.com because Virtual Shield is a virtual private network service that helps keep you safe as you browse the web. And they're helping to make this segment today and sponsoring my morning show. I am eternally grateful as Virtual Shield is my first sponsor ever, back when my channel was very tiny. Now, if you're online and you're worried about hackers, governments, corporations stealing your data, spying on you, then you're going to want to use a virtual private network. They're not magical. They can't, but they are a basic layer of security for you as you browse the web. Head over to Surfing Internet Safe. Stay private, fight censorship, get secured. $8.33 per month. You save 72% when you sign up now. Download the app for you. It works on basically everything. And the other thing, too, is that it helps bypass unconstitutional censorship actions. If these companies are trying to block you from getting access to certain information, a VPN like Virtual Shield can help bypass these restrictions. So again, surfinginternetsafe.com. Shout out to Virtual Shield. Thank you for the support. Let's get back to the news. The Lexington Herald-Leader reports SB 150, Kentucky legislature easily overrides Governor Beshear's veto of gender-affirming care ban bill. You need to understand, and I'm sure most of you do, the left lies and they use semantic games to win arguments. If you go to a random person, imagine this, go to Times Square and say, just with the half glazed over look on your face. So would you support giving a child a sex change surgery operation? And they're going to go, what? No, you wouldn't want to give a child a sex change operation. No, of course not. Now, what happens if you say gender affirming care? They'll say, what is that? Is that therapy? Right. No, they're talking about mastectomies. And what do they call it? A phalectomy or something like that? Here's the reporting. The Republican-dominated Kentucky General Assembly acted swiftly Wednesday to override Democratic Governor Andy Beshear's veto of the controversial Senate Bill 150, which bans gender-affirming care for trans youth. The override began Wednesday in the Senate, the chamber of origin, with a 29-8 vote. Just one Republican voted to oppose overriding the veto. And whoever that Republican is, you should vote them out, and they should be shamed. The House followed quickly behind, overriding the veto 76-23. 4 Republicans voted to oppose the measure and 1 Democrat voted for it. Throughout the override votes, The cries of hundreds of anti-SB 150 protesters who flocked to the Capitol to denounce the bill could be heard throughout the building's marble halls. Is that an insurrection? In the House, the Kentucky State Police forcibly removed several protesters, you mean insurrectionists, several protesters' gallery, and arrested 19 on charges of third-degree criminal trespassing. Don't you mean insurrection or seditious conspiracy? The House proceeded with the discussion on the bill over loud chants from the gallery as it became apparent the override would succeed. Bravo. In addition to banning puberty blockers, hormones, and surgeries for kids under 18, are you kidding me? In addition to those things, Senate Bill 150 would also ban lessons on gender identity and sexual orientation, prevent trans students from using the bathroom that corresponds with their gender identity, and stop school districts from requiring teachers use a student's pronouns if they don't align with their sex assigned at birth. This is the correct bill. The bill is the right thing, and it is good for everyone. Now, of course, you're going to have far left extremists, which represent a microscopic fraction of people in this country, threatening violence tomorrow, as they are, because they're not allowing sex changes on kids. I mean, I'm sorry. You're not going to get me behind that. You people have lost your minds. The bill has been called the most extreme and worst anti-LGBTQ piece of legislation in the country by pro-LGBTQ rights groups, including the Human Rights Campaign, the ACLU of Kentucky, and the Trevor Project. Many of those same organizations were quick to praise Beshear's veto. Beshear needs to be voted out. How Kentucky elected a man who wants to give children sex change operations is beyond me. But if that's you, Kentucky, bravo. You keep doing that, I guess, right? In his veto message Friday, Beshear cited statistics on youth mental health and suicide, including that nearly 1 in 5 trans or non-binary youth have attempted suicide. Now, this is the problem. Instead of asking yourself why young people are attempting suicide, they simply say it must be because they need to have sex change surgery. But maybe these young people who are suicidal are using sex change surgery as an out. I knew people growing up who cut. Yeah. And I'm sure you probably saw it. Young girls would cut their arms because the physical pain would override the emotional pain or something to that effect. Perhaps what's happening is young people who are depressed and or suicidal think, I can be someone else. They don't like who they are. They have low self-esteem and they're depressed. And then along comes someone who says, you can be a different person. You can be totally different. We can make that happen for you. And so many of these kids are probably saying, you know what? Fine, let me try it. The issue, many of these kids, I think the majority, these surgeries do not reduce the rate of suicide, which is why we have seen in Scandinavian countries, they have dropped this altogether. They have outright come out and said, it's not working. We can't do this anymore. The question is, does it make things worse? Well, what I see from this is many of these kids who are trans tend to be autistic, and it seems like eugenics. I don't know. Call it whatever you want. But there is a high propensity for autistic individuals to experience, for trans individuals to be autistic. And then what do? They remove their ability to reproduce under the auspices of gender affirming care. Jazz Jennings is a horrifying story. Poor Jazz will never have kids. Jazz, I don't think, will ever understand what it is to be a man, to be an adult human male. And the crazy thing about it is Jazz is now dating women. That's right. If you're not familiar, Jazz Jennings was trans by 3 years old, according to the family. Underwent surgeries before becoming an adult, hormone blockers, never developed reproductive function, had it removed, and is now dating women. No joke. I think this country is headed for a disaster. Quote, improving access to child sex change surgery is an important means of improving health outcomes for the transgender population. I'm paraphrasing Beshear here because I'm done saying the phrase gender affirming care. Senate Bill 150 will cause an increase in suicide among Kentucky's youth. Actually, no. Because I'm pretty sure the rates do not change with sex change surgery. In fact, it may actually increase, according to some studies. Republicans have denounced Beshear's veto, saying it shows he's out of touch with Kentuckians and aligned with the far left. Progressive groups like the pro-LGBTQ rights organization, the Fairness Campaign, have praised the governor's decision, saying he made the right decision. The bill was sponsored by Senator Max Wise, a Campbellsville Republican and Lieutenant Governor running mate of GOP gubernatorial candidate Kelly Craft, a former ambassador to Canada and the United Nations. Quote, I've had countless number of people coming up to me from both sides of the aisle to say, thank you for standing up for common sense. Thank you for standing up and being willing to stand in that gap, to be willing to take whatever it is thrown our way. Wise said on the Senate floor. If it's hit jobs from newspaper activists, if it is for standing up for parents, for those who do not show up here in committee meetings to testify because they're working and because they're also dependent upon us in a representative democracy, that we can make common sense decisions here that protect our children. The fiercest opponent of the legislation has been Senator Karen Berg of Louisville. For Berg, the issue is deeply personal. Her 24-year-old son, Henry Berg Brousseau, died by suicide in December. He was trans and had previously come to the Kentucky Capitol as a teen to oppose anti-trans legislation and went to work on the Human Rights Campaign. Full stop. Full stop. Ma'am, I am sorry to hear about your loss. That is horrifying. And I wish we could go back in time and stop that from happening, prevent it. My question to you is, in attempting to make sure we protect children, the children of other parents, have you asked yourself, has anyone else asked, why it is that your child who was affirmed, who received gender affirming care, was given all of these treatments, still took their own life? If our goal is to preserve life, and it is, then we have to stop the madness. It did not help your child. And you know, I'm not here to sugarcoat it or to pretend that or to pretend anything. I don't want this 24-year-old biological female to have lost her life. But if gender affirming care did not work, what are we doing? If this person still did not feel like the treatments being given were satisfactory, what are we doing? It's crazy to me. I think these people want them to die. I do. And I think it has a lot to do with Democrats reacting emotionally instead of logically. They're not trying to solve the problem. They're not realizing they're causing the problem. They're just exacerbating the problem because they're hysterical. This is a story of an individual who was given affirmation and still committed suicide. It is tragic. It is sad. I'm sorry that it happened. I don't want people to get hurt. I don't want these people to suffer, but I am sorry. What you are doing is making the problem worse. And I will not sit by and just let you condemn other people to the same fate. You are encouraging people to end their lives, and we have to stop it. You look at some of these stories from people who detransitioned or just transitioned, and they're sad and tragic. These people are saying that they were depressed and they were promised this other life, and it did not change anything. They needed mental therapy. Berg began her speech against SB 150 by reading from a final statement her son released for the HRC. Quote, "The last thing my child wrote to anybody and published it to the world," Berg said, "because our lives are quite literally on the line." Berg, who is also a physician, said calling this bill protecting children is completely disingenuous. And to call this a parent's right is an absolute despicable affront to me personally. We are denying families, their physicians, and their therapists the right to make medically informed decisions for their families. Where were all these people 100 years ago? This is the question that these people don't want to ask. Before the isolation of hormones, when people could not transition, it was not possible. Where was all of this? Now, the argument from the left is there were many suicides throughout history that were because people were gender dysphoric, but they had no means or understanding of how to transition. I disagree. I think what's happening is that we have isolated and synthesized hormones. We've figured out how to alter people's bodies, and now it is added to the mix. It didn't used to be possible to do any kind of transition. You could not give a woman testosterone to make her more manly appearing. You could not give a male estrogen to make him grow breasts. But when these things were invented, you began to see people flock to them. Before the advent of this technology, it did not exist. It couldn't. I'll put it this way. How many people today end their lives because they can't be a giraffe. Now, I know many people are going to say, stop being so offensive and silly. Nobody wants to be. People want to be giraffes. There was a person who got surgery to try and look like a tiger. They took their own life. Sad stuff. They weren't a tiger, but they said they were. When we get to the point where we do gene splicing and genetic engineering, are there going to be people who are going to be protesting saying, if you don't give someone the right to become a chicken, then you are condemning them? Because somebody who wants to be something else can't. They can change their appearance, but their body is their body. And what we're seeing with a lot of this stuff is actually just people who are physically altering themselves to appear slightly different. Here's the reality. Trans men are still female. Trans women are still male. They get surgery to alter their appearance. Some are more passing than others, and passing is a term they use to mean that to the average person, they can't tell you're trans. But there's a viral video going around, Ian Miles Chong posted it, where a bunch of trans people are shown to children in the nude, and they explain how they got surgeries and the things they did. And the thing is, when these people come out and stand before children in the buff, you can tell if they are male or female, no matter what. There's just no question. You can see that the trans men have very narrow shoulders and very wide hips. You can see the trans woman has very wide shoulders and narrow hips. That's just reality. I'm not saying it to be mean or disrespectful. I want people to be happy. And if you're an adult and you want to do whatever you want, you go ahead and do it. I don't care. You're an adult. I think it's fine. But that's not what's happening. They're going to children who don't know what it is to be in either body. And so the issue is this. If 99% of people ultimately just adhere to their biological sex, why would we risk destroying these children's lives and ability to reproduce on a 1% chance? It doesn't seem to make sense, does it? So what I see here is that YouTube, Twitter, Facebook are actively enforcing policies to harm children. I think they're evil. I think they're evil people. I think their attitude is it is politically expedient and economically viable to support harm to children. And you know what? They're likely to ban me for saying these things. Or you can call it a eugenics program. I've seen that posted on Twitter by a lot of people because it tends to be autistic children who want these surgeries. Why? Well, autistic kids don't understand social cues the same way non-autistic kids do. So kids who are autistic are trying to find out how to fit in. It's hard for them to understand. Well, they see the media, they see these protesters, they see their parents all cheering it on, saying, do it, do it, do it. And they say, this is what people want of me. But what ends up happening then is these children are sterilized. Not all of them, but many of them. Jazz Jennings being a perfect example. Kim Petras, for example, they'll never have families. 1 billion years of genetic activity, reproduction, ends with them. And this didn't exist 100 years ago. 100 years ago, even if someone did experience this, they'd still be able to have children. Not so much anymore. So I have to wonder, what is the motivation of these extremists? I think to a degree, it's eugenics. You take a look at the propensity, the advocacy for abortion and the sterilization of children, and it is all the same group of people. I have to wonder, are there powerful elites who want them to stop reproducing? Don't know. All I can tell you is this. In the long run, the math is obvious. If the left sterilizes their children or aborts their children, then in the future, there will be very few leftists. And many people say, yes, but they try to indoctrinate your kids, but they're losing that fight. This is part of it. They're saying you can't teach this stuff in schools, and they're freaking out. Get away from cities, homeschool your kids, get some chickens, become self-sufficient. It's better for the environment, and you'll protect your children. Have a family and make money. And in 20 years, this country will be saved because you will have well-adjusted, morally sound individuals running the country. And there's a long fight ahead of us. And it's because weak men make hard times. It's because for the past several decades, we have tolerated and allowed degeneracy and harm to children. Well, enough. You know, many of these boomers and Gen Xers, this is the debate we had last night about police. Sean Spicer was adamant that the police are never at fault and it's the person giving the orders. That mentality is what led us, in my opinion, with all due respect to Sean Spicer, I think he's a good dude, that led us here. When you see someone do something wrong, it is them. It is on them. We don't blame someone else. I don't look at these activists and go, well, I'm not going to blame them. It's the fault of, the Democrats. No, the individuals are at fault. You strike the problem at its root. And the root is the individuals who are taking the actions, and they should not be allowed to do these things. Now, as for the insurrection, we saw some arrests, but you see how they lie about everything. They lie about what the bill does. They lie about why they need it, and they dress up like demon clowns. I mean, I'm not joking. This guy dressed up like a clown with horns, like a demon clown. For whatever reason, I don't know what he's supposed to be. That's fine. You can dress however you want. But if these people want to harm children, I think that's the one thing the government needs to intervene on. There are challenges in the law. I get it, but I think Kentucky's doing the right thing. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.